What is the difference between a hand scroll, a hanging scroll, and an album leaf?
A hand scroll is a roll of paper or silk that is unfurled to reveal text and painted images. Hand scrolls are kept rolled up when not being viewed. Cinematic in nature, the images are presented piece by piece. As the viewer works his or her way through the hand scroll. Though usually around a foot long, hand scrolls can vary in length. Siagoi's 13th century hand scroll titled Pure and Remote View of Streams and Mountains, is nearly 30 feet long. Unlike a hand scroll, a hanging scroll can be seen all in one viewing and is displayed on a wall. Though not permanently. Even though hanging scrolls can be rather large, they were not intended for large public spaces, but for smaller, private viewings. An album is essentially a book of paintings, usually of similar subject matter. An individual painting is called a leaf.
What is existentialist art?
After World War II, European artists, writers, and thinkers struggled to come to terms with not only the physical destruction wrought by war, but with its psychological toll. Existentialism was a philosophical response popularized by French thinkers such as Jean-Paul Sartre. 1905 to 1980, whose treatise Being and Nothingness. 1943, described the anxiety and meaninglessness of existence, as well as the pursuit of authenticity in life. Existentialism was a powerful influence on post-war art in Europe, and its themes were explored by artists such as Francis Bacon, Alberto Giacometti, and Jean Dubuffet.
What is Romanesque art?
Although the term itself was not used until the 19th century. Romanesque means Roman-like and is used to describe 11th through 12th century medieval art and architecture featuring Roman characteristics. The Romanesque period saw a revival in monumental architecture, sculpture, and wall painting.
What movies have been made about famous artists?
Artists have been inspiring films for decades. The following is a short list of movies either about or inspired by artists. Exit Through the Gift Shop. 2010, an intriguing documentary about the enigmatic street artist Banksy. Little Ashes. 2008, Robert Pattinson plays Salvador Dali in a film about the artist's relationships with filmmaker Luis Buñuel and writer Federico Garcia Lorca. Factory Girl, 2006. A dramatic look at Edie Sedgwick's relationship with Andy Warhol. Klimt. 2006, John Malkovich plays the Austrian artist Gustav Klimt. Modigliani, 2004. A dramatic romance that focuses on the rivalry between artists Modigliani and Picasso in Paris. The Girl with the Pearl Earring, 2003. A film inspired by a novel by Tracy Chevalier that was in turn inspired by the famous painting by Jan Vermeer. Frida. 2002, Salma Hayek and Alfred Molina star as Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera, respectively. Pollock, 2000. Starring Ed Harris as abstract expressionist painter Jackson Pollock. Marcia Gay Harden won the Academy Award for her portrayal of Lee Krasna. Goya in Bordeaux. 1999, a dramatic Spanish-language film about the artist Francisco de Goya. Surviving Picasso. 1996, Anthony Hopkins stars as Pablo Picasso in this film about the women in his life. Basquiat. 1996, a biopic of the postmodernist artist Jean-Michel Basquiat. I Shot Andy Warhol. 1996, Lily Taylor stars as Valerie Solanese, who shot Andy Warhol in 1968. Vincent and Theo, 1990. Robert Altman directs this film about the relationship between brothers Vincent and Theo Van Gogh. Camille Claudel. 1988, a French film about sculptor Camille Claudel and her relationship with Auguste Rodin. Auberai, 1986. Donald Sutherland plays French artist Paul Gauguin.
What are some of the most important Christian symbols in art?
Dove, a symbol of purity and peace. The dove can also symbolize the Holy Spirit of the Christian Trinity. Lamb, the lamb represents sacrifice. Jesus Christ is referred to as the Lamb of God as he was sacrificed on behalf of humanity. A flock of sheep, by contrast, represents Christian worshippers who are protected by Christ. The Good Shepherd. Cross, this is the most prominent symbol of Christianity and it symbolizes the wooden beams used to crucify Jesus Christ. It is both a symbol of Christ's suffering, as well as Christ's triumph and resurrection. Four evangelists. The four evangelists are also referred to as the four Gospels as they wrote the Gospels in the New Testament of the Bible. Each of them is often represented with a particular symbol or attribute. Saint Matthew is shown as a man or angel, Saint Mark is a lion. Saint Luke is an ox, Saint John is an eagle.
Who was Jacques-Louis David?
Jacques-Louis David, 1748–1825, was arguably the most important French painter working in the neoclassical style, whose art first exemplified the values of the French Revolution, and then the imperial style of Emperor Napoleon. In his history paintings, such as the Oath of the Artei, 1784, David depicted patriotic Roman scenes, which emphasized themes of sacrifice and heroism, and captured the spirit of the revolution. His 1793 painting, The Death of Murat, which was commissioned during the Bloody Reign of Terror, commemorates the bloody death of Jean-Pierre Murat, a Jacobin journalist and politician murdered while in the bathtub by a woman aligned with the Girondins, an opposing political faction. Murat was known to have a debilitating skin disease, and often worked while soaking in the bathtub. The painting idealizes Murat, whose body slumps over the edge of the tub, which is presented in a minimalist fashion against a simple bathroom. Quite unlike Murat's real bathroom, which was rather more opulent. In his left hand, Murat still holds a handwritten note, while in his right hand, a quill. Nearby is the bloody knife that the assassin, Charlotte Corday, had used to stab him through the chest. David belonged to the same political party as Murat, and this painting clearly serves as political propaganda. Once the revolution was over, David's political fortunes rose and fell. He served a short time in prison, and then as the president. But, he eventually aligned himself with a new power, Napoleon Bonaparte, who ruled over France from 1804 to 1815, and became an important patron for David.
What is Africobra?
Africobra, an artists' collective founded in Chicago in 1968, stands for African Commune of bad relevant artists and developed out of the earlier group OBAC, or Organization of Black American Culture, a multidisciplinary group of writers, historians, and artists. The group of artists who were painters, photographers, printmakers, fiber artists, and sculptors included Jeff Donaldson, 1932 to 2004, Wadsworth Jarrell, 1929, Barbara Jones Hagu, 1938, and others. It emphasized collaboration and explored African American identity and artistic heritage. In work that was often brightly colored, figurative, and focused on social themes. Donaldson, Jarrell, and other members of OBAC worked together to create the Wall of Respect, a mural painted on the south side of Chicago in 1967 to promote civil rights and community involvement. In 1973, the city of Chicago razed the building upon which the mural was painted. But the work spurred on similar politically minded mural projects both in the city and internationally.
What was so shocking about Manet's paintings?
Manet's Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe, The Luncheon on the Grass. 1863, was couched in art historical tradition, and draws clear connections to a 16th-century painting from the Venetian Renaissance called the Pastoral Concert, which also depicts a small gathering of minstrels and partially nude women relaxing in a country setting. The nudity alone was not enough to shock 19th-century viewers. But it was apparently the contrast between the well-dressed men and the complete nudity of the central female figure, who stares confidently out from the picture plane, that pushed it over the top. she, and a semi-naked bather in the background, were interpreted as prostitutes. Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe was not a neoclassical work, nor a modest depiction of female beauty as was common from the Renaissance, but a bold portrayal of contemporary figures engaging in what was perceived of as immoral behavior. Manet's equally shocking Olympia, 1863, also drew on Renaissance predecessors. Specifically Titian's Venus of Urbino, but instead of a demure reclining nude. Manet presented a boldly staring woman who confronts the viewer with her nudity. While in Titian's painting, a small dog, a symbol of loyalty, is curled asleep at the foot of the bed. Manet's painting includes a black cat with yellow eyes and an arched back. Though both of these paintings were shocking to the public, they were hailed by some, including Émile Zola, as masterpieces for their ability to communicate truth through realism, and for confronting traditional approaches to painting.
What are earthworks?
Earthworks, also known as land art, are works of art made of natural materials such as earth, rocks, water, usually on an extremely large scale. Land art became popular in the 1960s. Earthworks have been linked to minimalism due to their inherent simplicity, and some scholars have called this form a reaction against consumerism because it is nearly impossible for anyone to buy or sell, or exhibit, land art. The most famous example of an earthwork is Spiral Jetty, built on Roselle Point in the Great Salt Lake in Utah in 1970 by artist Robert Smithson. Spiral Jetty is monumental indeed, a 1,500-foot-long embankment made of earth, mud, and basalt rocks that juts into the lake, periodically submerged due to the changing levels of the lake. Earthworks such as Spiral Jetty are built on such a large scale that they evoke the mystery and largesse of ancient monuments and sites such as Cahokia or Serpent Mound. Other examples of earthworks are Michael Heiser's Double Negative, 1969-70, which was created by cutting the sides of a canyon wall in the Arizona desert, as well as Walter de Maria's Lightning Field, 1977.
What is a Ngatu?
A Ngatu is a royal Tongan bark cloth made by women. The Kingdom of Tonga is a group of over 100 islands located southeast of Fiji and southwest of Samoa. Fiji and Samoa also have bark cloth design traditions. Textiles such as the Ngatu are highly prized items and are given as gifts during ceremonies and special occasions. Ngatu are hand-painted, rubbed with dye, stenciled, and perfumed. Usually deep brown, black, and beige in color, they can feature highly abstract designs or depict naturalistic images such as fish, or other sea life.
Who were the great masters?
The term great master can be thrown around quite loosely to indicate a highly esteemed artist, and is used to describe certain Renaissance and 16th century artists. Artists such as Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Titian, among many others, are referred to both as great masters and occasionally as old masters. To differentiate them from notable artists from more historically recent times. Towards the end of the Renaissance, master artists were increasingly seen as celebrities, rather than mere manual laborers. The term itself comes from the master-apprentice system that was used to train artists during the Renaissance. In this system, rather than be sent to an art school, there were none at this time. Students as young as 5 years old would be sent to work and train as a workshop apprentice under the guidance of a master artist. The master usually promised to feed and house the apprentice in exchange for assistance cleaning and preparing materials, and eventually working on the master's art commissions. Many works by famous artists were the product of a workshop staffed by many artists, including young apprentices.
What is the difference between an art historian and an art critic?
While art historians are interested in the meaning of a work of art and its cultural and historical context, the job of the art critic is to evaluate, to decide whether or not a particular piece of art is good or successful. Generally, critics view art at galleries and museums, or in private collections, and they write their personal opinions about the art they see. Like the definition of art itself, however, the definition of art criticism is murky at times. And James Elkins, a well-respected critic and scholar, raises questions about how the two are differentiated, noting that art historians, along with their art critic colleagues, are known to share their personal opinions as well.
Who is Barbara Kruger?
Barbara Kruger, 1945. Is an American conceptual artist and graphic designer known for her photographic collages. As a student in New York City, she was taught by famed photographers Diane Arbus and Marvin Israel. And she later became a graphic designer at Harper's Bazaar and then chief designer at Mademoiselle. Kruger's work uses the power of mass media and advertisement to make her text and image pieces, which usually feature black and white images with bold, white on red text, manipulating the power of slogans. Kruger's work broadcasts such messages as "I shop therefore I am" and "We don't need another hero." Her work also questions the traditionally passive role of women in art with her famous piece, "Your Gaze Hits the Side of My Face," 1981, which depicts the profile view of a female sculpture along with the text, Kruger often uses personal pronouns such as I, you, and me so as to avoid gender associations and make her statements universal. Her later work often uses appropriated images, and more recently, she has begun creating installations. Kruger's style has been described as agitprop, a blend of the words agitation and propaganda. And 250 her work focuses on themes of feminism, consumerism, and identity.
What is Orpheism?
Orphism, sometimes called Orphic Cubism, is a movement that developed within Cubism and is characterized by abstractions and rhythmic color arranged to emphasize the joyous power of creation and the relationship between visual art and music. The name Orphism was coined by French poet Guillaume Apollinaire, 1880 to 1918, and the name refers to the mythological figure Orpheus, a poet whose beautiful lyrics and music could seduce wild animals. One of the major artists associated with Orphism was Robert Delaunay, 1885-1941, who passed through a cubist phase and experimented with color theory and concepts of space. Much like his fellow cubists, Braque and Picasso, Delaunay created color abstractions such as simultaneous contrasts, sun and moon. 1913, that relied on color interactions to create a sense of depth and movement. Delaunay's wife Sonia also created Orphic works, including paintings, collages, and clothing designs. By 1914, Apollinaire and Delaunay could no longer agree on the main tenets of Orphism and the movement ended.
What are the catacombs of Camodilla?
These catacombs were used for Christian burials as early as the 4th century. Smaller loculi, or rectangular niches, held between 2 or 3 bodies. But larger, and more expensive, cubicula held the sarcophagi of wealthier families. The cubicula were plastered and painted with Christian imagery. Many of the images found in the catacombs of Camodilla emphasize the Eucharist. The ritual consumption of bread and wine, the bread and body of Christ. Other popular images include the Good Shepherd and images of Jonah and the whale. In this story, Jonah was thrown overboard while at sea and was consumed by a whale. 3 days later, he was cast back out, unharmed. The story reflects themes of the resurrection as well as rebirth and salvation.
What is the significance of the Aztec eagle man?
The Eagle Man, c. 1440 to 1469, is a 67-inch high fired clay sculpture depicting a youthful man wearing an eagle-shaped helmet and long, winged sleeves. The upper portion of the sculpture is well rendered, but overall The body is simplistic, and it was possibly dressed in military garments. The sculpture perhaps depicts an Aztec warrior. Aztec warriors were known for their fearlessness and ferocity.
What is line?
Imagine holding an ink pen and pressing the pen against a piece of paper to make a black dot. Continue to hold the pen and then slowly drag the pen across the page. The original black point has now been extended horizontally to form a line. Line is one of the core elements of art. Line is used to outline shapes and to create forms. The characteristics of a line convey feeling and emotion. A shaky line is vulnerable while a bold, straight line is powerful. The term linear is used to describe art that emphasizes line as opposed to light, color, or form. A linear sculpture is one that emphasizes its outline, or exterior contours.
What is feminist art?
Feminist art began in the 1960s. Developing out of the politically and socially motivated women's liberation movement. The goal of feminist art was to reinterpret art history, which was deemed to be systematically sexist, and to promote women's contributions to art and culture. Women have been making art throughout history, and yet art made by women, for example, ceramics, jewelry, and textiles, has traditionally been categorized as a craft, which is held in less regard than so-called works of fine art, such as painting or sculpture. Feminist artists aimed to raise the status of craft, much in the way that Renaissance artists aimed to raise the status of the artist during the 16th and 17th centuries. During the 1960s and 1970s, men were disproportionately represented by art galleries, and women artists formed their own groups and collective galleries to promote their work. Feminist art groups included War, Women Artists in Revolution, and the Feminist Art Program. Established by pioneering feminist artists Judy Chicago, 1939, and Miriam Shapiro, 1923, in Southern California. Artists who worked with the early feminist art movement were also associated with other movements and styles, including minimalism, conceptual art, and installation art.
What was Cahokia?
Cahokia was the largest pre-Columbian city in what is now the United States, and peaked in size with a population of nearly 25,000 between the years 800 and 1500, bigger than the city of London at the time. Like the Great Serpent Mound, Cahokia was built by the Mississippian people, and featured numerous earthen mounds, the result of a huge labor effort. There were around 120 mounds at Cahokia. The largest, known as Monk's Mound, was 100 feet tall, aligned to the sun. and possibly used as some kind of astronomical observatory in a manner similar to Stonehenge. Evidence of the city can be seen in southern Illinois.
What is ukiyo-e painting?
In Japanese, ukiyo-e literally means, pictures of the floating world. This Buddhist phrase is used to describe a style of Japanese woodblock prints and paintings that developed during the Edo period, 1603 to 1868, and continued on through the 20th century. Woodblock prints from the Edo period were a major influence on Impressionist painters in France, and were notable for their use of color, the importance of landscape, and the focus on bourgeois life through images of dancing, theaters, geishas, and urban street scenes. Ukiyo-e woodblock prints are delicately colored with natural dyes and feature thinly outlined forms. They were affordable and extremely popular during the 18th and 19th centuries, and were sold by shopkeepers and street vendors in big cities such as Tokyo, known as Edo during the 18th century. 3 separate artists usually made woodblock prints: a painter, a carver, and a printer. The painter would first paint the original image. Then, a block of wood, often made of cherry, was carved with the outline of the image to be printed, covered in black ink, and then pressed to fine paper. A separate block was carved for each additional color used. This meant that multiple blocks were required for a single print. Sometimes as many as 20 separate blocks. Ukiyo-e woodblock prints depicted the secular, material world, though artists subtly emphasized the Buddhist concept of the transient nature of physical existence.
What is the orator?
The orator is a life-size, bronze sculpture of Aulus Metellus, a Roman official from the time of the Roman Republic, made in either the 1st or 2nd century BCE. The work depicts the authoritative politician addressing a crowd with his right arm raised, wearing traditional leather boots and a toga. The portrait sculpture is part of a tradition of Roman realism known as Verism, popular during the time of the Democratic Republic. Statues like this would have been placed on the tops of columns as a form of memorial, where it would appear as if the figure was addressing the people below.
Why did Romans hire Etruscan artists?
The Etruscans were famous in the ancient world for their skill as bronze workers, and Etruscan artists were sought after to make bronze sculptures for the Romans after the Roman conquest of Etruria. Etruscan artists often made small funerary or domestic objects, and were also skilled at making portrait sculpture. One notable example is a portrait bust of a man, likely a dignitary or an ancient hero, from around 300 BCE. The man's eyes, made of painted ivory, communicate a solemn nobility, and the hair and facial features are finely detailed.
What is a centrally planned church?
A centrally planned church is a church with the altar at the center, and was often used for baptisteries or tombs. The Church of Santa Costanza is an example of a centrally planned church, featuring a central altar surrounded by an ambulatory. The ambulatory is made up of paired Corinthian columns. The Church of Santa Costanza was originally covered in elaborate mosaics and marble.
Who was Annibale Carracci?
The paintings of Annibale Carracci, 1560 to 1609, were innovative for their naturalism, broken brush strokes, and use of light. Carracci came from an artistic family. His older brother Agostino and his cousin, Ludovico, were also highly esteemed painters. Carracci was particularly inspired by northern Italian Renaissance masters such as Titian, Correggio, and Tintoretto, and he wanted to carry on a tradition of classically inspired painting. He studied in Rome, where he was impressed with the work of Michelangelo and Raphael. Like them, he went on to create masterfully illusionistic frescoes and ceiling paintings. In 1595 he was commissioned by Cardinal Odoardo Farnese to decorate the Farnese Palace in Rome. His work there is a Baroque masterpiece known as The Loves of the Gods, a cycle of ceiling frescoes. It took nearly 10 years to complete the paintings, which cover the barrel-vaulted ceiling of the palazzo and feature monumental scenes depicting mythological gods and heroes. Carracci's work went on to inspire other great fresco artists, such as Pietro da Cortona, as well as other painters, including Poussin and Rubens.
What is an illuminated manuscript?
An illuminated manuscript is an illustrated book, and was one of the most important forms of art in medieval Europe and elsewhere, including the Islamic Empire. During the early Middle Ages, European illuminated manuscripts were an important part of Christian missionary activities, and Christian monasteries were at the heart of manuscript production. Specially trained monks, called scribes, wrote text on two different types of animal skin: vellum and parchment, as paper was not common until the 15th century. Medieval illuminators supplemented the text with colorful decoration, often designing large initials and full-color illustrations that took up an entire page. Illuminated manuscripts were very labor-intensive and expensive. The ink alone was worth as much as a semi-precious stone, and sometimes gold leaf was used in the decoration. Manuscripts were sometimes protected with expensive jewel-encrusted covers, such as the cover of the Lindau Gospels.
Why was Picasso's Demoiselles d'Avignon so important?
Picasso's Demoiselles d'Avignon, 1907, was significant because it shocked the early 20th century art world and foreshadowed Cubism and other forms of 20th century modernism. The large painting, 7.9 x 7.6 feet, depicts a group of nude prostitutes with large, almond-shaped eyes, disjointed poses, and mask-like faces. The painting was radical for its subject matter as well as its incorporation of African style, especially on such a large scale. The painting was not necessarily a critical success, and even Picasso's friends found it to be ugly. However, the artist Georges Braque, 1882–1963, saw the painting and was inspired by its broken lines and geometric dissolution of form. Demoiselles d'Avignon inspired Braque to experiment with a style that would be known as Cubism. One of the most significant revolutions in modern art.
Why did Alexander Calder make mobiles?
American artist Alexander Calder, 1898–1976, was interested in sculpture that moved, also known as kinetic sculpture. Trained as an engineer and an artist, Calder was intrigued by Piet Mondrian's experimentations of color and form, and himself created moving Mondrian's free-hanging mobile sculptures engaged in constant physical change. Not only do Calder's works of art move, but the viewer may move around the art, allowing for ever-changing dynamic viewpoints. Calder's mobile one of those. 1972, is composed of abstract biomorphic forms that suggest organic, lively objects. Calder made more than mobiles. Other sculptural works include the 50-ton arched steel flamingo in Chicago, 1973, and the curving, fin-studded whale 2. Constructed of wood and steel in 1964 after the 1937 original, housed at the Museum of Modern Art in New York.
What is the difference between engraving and etching?
Both engraving and etching are forms of intaglio printmaking. To make an engraving, an artist uses a sharp, pointed tool called a burin to cut lines into a metal plate. This is called incising. The metal plate is then inked, and the ink is forced into the grooves made by the burin. The plate can then be pressed. Dry point is similar to engraving, though a needle is used rather than a burin. Etching is slightly different. To make an etching, an artist covers a metal plate with an acid-resistant layer of ground. Rather than carve directly into the plate, the artist draws into the ground. revealing small areas of exposed metal underneath. The plate is then submerged into an acid bath. The acid eats away at the exposed metal, creating grooved lines in the shape of the drawn image. The longer the plate remains in the acid, the deeper the grooves will be and the more ink they will hold. Now that the metal plate bears the artist's image, it can be pressed and the image can be transferred to paper. Aquatint is a form of etching that allows the artist to create different areas of tone or value. Developed in the 18th century. Aquatint involves heating a layer of rosin on a metal plate before placing it in the acid bath. Acid-resistant varnish is used to create areas of white on the final printed image.
What was the Indus Valley Civilization?
The Indus Valley Civilization, c. 2600 to 1900 BCE, was one of the earliest civilizations in South Asia and was established in present-day Pakistan and northwest India. It is sometimes referred to as the Harappa civilization. Major urban areas of the Indus Valley include Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and Shanhudaro, which form a cohesive group due to their architectural similarities. Not much is known about Indus Valley culture or religion, but the discovery of art artifacts, including ancient seals, greatly interests art historians and other scholars who are eager to make cultural connections between the Indus Valley and contemporary art and culture in India and Southeast Asia.
What were the major art traditions of the woodland period?
The two dominant art traditions of the woodland period were the art of the Adena culture and the Hopewell. These cultures shared a number of visual motifs and symbols, and greatly influenced the art of other native North American cultures across the continent. Both the Adena and the Hopewell were known for building large-scale earthworks as well as smaller pieces of sculpture and jewelry, often made from copper, or cut from mica, a layered silicate mineral. Because of the plundering of sites and an overall lack of documentation, a great deal remains unknown about the art traditions of the Adena and Hopewell.
What is Machu Picchu?
Machu Picchu was a 15th century royal estate constructed by the Inca king Pachacuti, high in the Andes Mountains near Cuzco, Peru. A great deal of mystery and wonder surrounds this long-forgotten and well-preserved site, which caught public attention and public imagination after American archaeologist Hiram Bingham studied it in 1911. Machu Picchu sits at an elevation of 9,000 feet. The site consists of stone buildings, terraced farm plots, open plazas, and religious shrines. The architecture at Machu Picchu matches other Inca sites and was built out of granite using Inca masonry techniques. A style of stone construction that consisted of joining pillow-shaped blocks without mortar. Similar construction can be seen throughout the city of Cuzco, as well as on a large scale in the fortress palace, Sacsayhuaman, in the hills outside of the city.
What is suprematism?
Suprematism developed between 1913 and 1915 by Russian artist Casimir Malevich 204, 1878 to 1935, was concerned with pure aesthetics and therefore promoted total abstraction and freedom from realism, politics, and the past. Suprematist paintings often depict geometric abstractions. Malevich was interested in the square as a pure form, and much of his work focuses on rectangular composition, such as Black Square, 1915, and Suprematist Composition, White on White, 1918. Other paintings, such as Suprematist Composition conveying the feeling of a mystic wave from outer space, 1917, were visual attempts to communicate with the subconscious. Other artists associated with suprematism were Ivan Puny, 1894 to 1956, and Lyubov Popova, 1889 to 1924, among others.
What is the Würzburg residence?
The Würzburg residence is an important example of Rococo architecture in Germany designed by Johann Balthasar Neumann. 1687 to 1744, for the Prince Bishop of Würzburg, a member of the Schönborn family. The Kaisersaal, or Imperial Hall, of the residence has a gold, white, and pastel color scheme and emphasizes curves and elaborate ornamentation, including marble columns and undulating moldings. A grand staircase expands to over 600 square feet. Its balustrades and banisters decorated with statues and Greek vases. Above the sprawling stairs, the Italian Rococo artist Giovanni Tiepolo painted what is believed to be the largest ceiling fresco in the world. It depicts the Prince Bishop with the Greek god Apollo, along with images of the seasons, the zodiac, and the four known continents of the world, all symbolizing the wide-reaching power of the Schönborn family.
What is the difference between a shogun, a daimyo, and a samurai?
From the 12th century until the 19th century, Japan was a feudal society controlled by a powerful ruler, called a shogun. The shogun maintained power over his large territory. The daimyo, a Japanese word meaning great names, were feudal landowners equivalent to medieval European lords. The daimyo commanded the samurai, a distinct class of swordsmen trained to be devoted to the shogun.
What is the difference between a column and a pier?
A column is a cylindrical vertical support that usually tapers towards the top in the manner of a tree trunk. Columns can be freestanding or engaged, which means they are attached to a wall. Engaged columns do not provide structural support. Conventional columns that follow the traditional Greek classical orders feature a base, shaft, and capital. Also see Art of the Ancient World, c. 5000 BCE to 400 C.E. A pier is generally much larger than a column and is usually made of stone, brick, or concrete. Piers act as vertical supports for masonry constructions such as arcades.
What is the Vitruvian Man?
The Vitruvian Man is a drawing by Leonardo da Vinci of a visual concept described by the Roman architect Vitruvius in the 1st century B.C.E. in his work on architecture. As an architect, Vitruvius was interested in harmony, symmetry, and balance, all qualities that were highly valued by classically minded artists and architects during the Renaissance, including Leonardo da Vinci. He explained his belief that supremely beautiful and unified architecture could be created using the proportions of the human body as a guide. As Vitruvius never provided any illustrations of his own, many different artists attempted to visually depict the concept. Da Vinci's drawing is likely the most familiar version. An idealized human male is depicted standing tall within a circle and a square. The figure's outstretched arms are shown in duplicate. One set reaches the point at which the circle meets the square, while the second set runs horizontally, reaching the vertical sides of the square. The figure also has two pairs of legs, one straight, and one outstretched, mirroring the position of the arms. The drawing highlights Leonardo da Vinci's mathematical creativity and emphasizes the Renaissance preference for geometric balance.
Why was Charlemagne interested in illustrated manuscripts?
The medieval ruler Charlemagne was crowned Holy Roman Emperor in the year 800 and controlled a territory that included Germany, France, the Netherlands, and parts of Italy. As Holy Roman Emperor, Charlemagne's goal was to unify his secular government with the Christian Church and to restore the Western Roman Empire, albeit as a Christian kingdom. Charlemagne clearly saw the power of arts and education as a fundamental part of his campaign, and he turned to monasteries, the intellectual centers of the medieval world, to support his mission of conquering all of Europe. Charlemagne's court in Aachen, Germany, became a leading center for artists, including architects, sculptors, and illuminators. Charlemagne's scriptoria in Aachen produced some of the most important illuminated manuscripts of the late 8th and 9th centuries in Europe, which resulted in the spread of Christianity. The standardization of church practices, and the solidification of the emperor's power across Europe.
What is the Bauhaus?
The Bauhaus was a progressive art and design school established in Weimar, Germany, in 1919. With the goal of training art students to create works that blended artistry with commercialism. The school was home to some of the most well-respected and revolutionary artists, designers, and architects of the day, including Paul Klee, 1879–1940, Johannes Itten, 1888–1967, and Vasily Kandinsky, 1866–1944, who lived together on site in the specially designed school. The first director of the Bauhaus was Walter Gropius, 1889–1983. A renowned modern architect known for his interest in function. The courses covered both practice-based art training, on topics such as painting, furniture making, ceramics, bookbinding, metalworking, and eventually architecture, as well as more theoretical concepts including art historical analysis, color theory, and even meditation. Unlike many art schools, the Bauhaus included the applied arts in its curriculum and actively sought out design commissions, with the goal of creating art objects that blended art and craft. Students infused everyday objects with elements of high design. For example, Peter Kaller's 1922 design for a cradle reflects both geometric simplicity and functional efficiency. The politically left-leaning Bauhaus began to lose funding as more conservative policies took hold in Germany during the 1920s. The school first moved to Dessau, and then to Berlin, but was eventually closed in the 1930s as the Nazis gained power. Many of the key Bauhaus leaders and faculty members Walter Gropius, Laszlo Moholy-Nagy, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, Joseph Albers emigrated to the United States. The Bauhaus embrace of industrialism and its goal of creating functional design made an enormous impact on the art and architecture of the 20th century.
What is the Gleaners?
The Gleaners, 1857, is a painting by Jean-François Millet, 1814–1875. A member of the Barbizon school, which depicts French laborers on a monumental scale and exemplifies the transition between Romanticism and Realism. The Gleaners is a large oil painting with soft, diffused brush strokes and a sense of nostalgia for the countryside during the time of the Industrial Revolution. The term gleaner refers to rural people who gathered any produce discarded by the farm workers after the harvest, extremely physically demanding work that usually resulted in very little of value. The faces of the peasant women are obscured, rendering the peasants as symbols rather than individuals. The painting elicits sympathy for the rural poor through the soft light and the monumentality of the figures. It also juxtaposes the poor with the wealthy as more prosperous farm workers. With expensive equipment can be seen efficiently harvesting in the background. After seeing the work, some critics believed Millet harbored sympathies for the recent revolutions of 1848. Eliciting controversy despite Millet's denials.
How are Chinese characters formed?
Rather than referring to sounds like the English alphabet, the letters of the Chinese alphabet refer to entire words or ideas. These are called characters, or calligraphs. Like Near Eastern cuneiform and Egyptian hieroglyphs. Some Chinese characters started out as pictographs, which means the character resembles what it depicts. The Chinese language is extremely visual in that the form of the language also denotes meaning. And this made a major impact on Chinese art throughout history.
What are the main characteristics of Ottonian architecture?
The Ottonian rulers emphasized their imperial strength and military prowess. Through the construction of monumental architecture reminiscent of ancient Rome. Churches of the period followed the basilica plan and featured wooden roofs, many of which burned down. The Church of Saint Cyriacus in Gernrode, Germany, begun in 961. Is one of the best surviving examples of Ottonian architecture. The church architects placed a newfound focus on verticality, which foreshadowed the leaping heights of much later medieval buildings. The Church of Saint Cyriacus features a second-floor gallery, clerestory windows, and a westwork wall along the west end 74 of the nave, one of the key features of Ottonian church architecture.
What is a menhir?
In the Celtic language, men means stone and here means long. A translation of menhir is therefore long stone. Menhirs were roughly shaped single stones likely of symbolic importance to the Neolithic people of Northern Europe who made them. An enormous arrangement of these stones, known as menhir alignments, was discovered at Carnac, in southern France, likely made around 3000 BCE. The Neolithic people of the area placed thousands of heavy menhirs in a series of rows nearly 4,000 feet long. The exact purpose of the menhir alignments at Carnac remains a mystery.
What are Siehi's 6 canons?
Siehi was a painter and scholar from the late 5th century, who is known for establishing 6 laws or canons of painting. These 6 canons go a long way in explaining the underlying philosophy of Chinese painting. There is ongoing debate as to the exact translation of each of the canons. But according to James Cahill, author of the 6 Laws and How to Read Them, they are as follows: engender a sense of movement through spirit consonance. Use the brush with the bone method. Responding to things, depict their forms. According to kind, describe appearances with color. Dividing and planning, positioning and arranging. Transmitting and conveying earlier models through copying and transcribing. See Kleiner 57. While difficult to understand, Siehi's principles of painting tell art historians a great deal about what was important to early Chinese painters. The first principle suggests a strong connection between art making and spirituality. The goal was to capture the spontaneity and intangible spirit quality of the subject being depicted. The latter principles are slightly more straightforward, and refer to technical skills. Siehi explains how to hold the paintbrush, encourages naturalism, and emphasizes skill development through copying and practice.
What is prehistory?
Prehistory is the period of human history that preceded the invention of writing. Prehistoric art, therefore, is art made before the existence of the written word. The prehistoric art covered in this section spans from around 35,000 BCE to 1000 BCE.
What is stained glass?
Stained glass is translucent colored glass set in a lead framework, and usually used in windows. Stained glass was used in early Christian and Byzantine churches as well, but was particularly favored by Gothic architects for whom it began an important form of art. The process of making stained glass hasn't changed much in nearly 1,000 years. The colors in the glass come from adding metal oxides to molten glass, a labor-intensive process. Detailed images are made by using black enamel paint and fusing it to the glass through firing. The glass artist then organizes the colored glass fragments on a flat surface, like an enormous puzzle, until reaching the desired image, and then joins the glass to lead strips and iron bands, which support the heavy glass.
What is a Rago image?
Arago was a type of image that warmly depicted the Amida Buddha welcoming dying souls to paradise. The Descent of the Amida Trinity is a Rago triptych from the Kamakura period in which the illuminated forms of the Amida Buddha and 2 bodhisattvas appear to hover against a dark background. The radiant figures were done with gold paint and gold leaf, creating a contrast with the otherwise subdued silk surface of the triptych. The image emphasizes comfort and peace in the face of death.
What is a psalter?
A psalter is a book containing the text of the Book of Psalms from the Old Testament. The most famous Carolingian psalter is the Utrecht Psalter, known for its lively ink drawings. The manuscript was produced at the Imperial Scriptorium in Reims. In modern-day France, in the first half of the 9th century. The illustrations of the Utrecht Psalter incorporate architectural and landscape scenes. And the text features Roman-style majuscules. As psalms are not narrative, they are challenging to illustrate. The artists who created the Utrecht Psalter illustrated them by expressively visualizing specific phrases from the text.
Why are the Cubist paintings of Braque and Picasso so similar?
Even for scholars, it is sometimes nearly impossible to tell the work of Picasso and Braque apart. And it is possible that Cubism would not have developed at all without the competitive exchange of ideas that occurred during the dueling careers of these two artists. Both explored still lives, were intrigued by the physical properties of musical instruments, and often painted with similar color palettes. As Braque himself explained, "We were like two mountain climbers roped together," quoted in Stockstad 1079.
What is a thanka?
The thanka is a painted banner, and an important form of Tibetan art. Thankas often depict important people such as spiritual and political leaders in a way similar to Byzantine icons, which suggests that those individuals depicted in thankas have reached a semi-divine status. The thanka of Green Tara is nearly 2 feet long and depicts the protective Tibetan deity, Green Tara, who personifies transcendent wisdom and is often thought of as the universal mother figure to Buddhas. Made with ink and color on canvas, this 13th century thanka shows the deity surrounded by architectural forms and 17 species of the Bodhi tree. This particular thanka is part of the Indian and Southeast Asian art collection at the Cleveland Art Museum.
What is the Akbarnama?
The Akbarnama, c. 1569 to 1590, was a series of 116 miniature paintings that document the life and successes of Akbar the Great. The Akbarnama is known for its exceptional detail and realism. Multiple artists worked to produce the work. Akbar the Great commissioned his friend Abul Fasil, 1551 to 1602, to write the biography. For the ruler's personal copy, the painter Baswan was charged with designing and drawing the illustrations, while Shatar Muni then provided the coloring. Folio 22 of the Akbarnama, now part of the collection at the Victoria and Albert Museum. vividly depicts Akbar riding Hawaii, a wild elephant, chasing a second enormous, out-of-control elephant as it stampedes across a pontoon bridge. The image is filled with bold colors and details that add drama to the story. The water is textured so as to appear disturbed by the thrashing of the boatman knocked into it by the charging elephant. According to the story, Akbar was able to calm and capture the elephant, and the image stands as a metaphor for Akbar's ability to rule a large and often difficult empire.
What is Nok sculpture?
Some of Africa's earliest art has been found in modern day Nigeria and was created by the Neolithic Nok people of that region. Many archaeological fragments from approximately 500 to 200 BCE have been found accidentally during tin mining work, including fragments of human and animal sculpture. The discovered sculptures can vary greatly in size. Some are quite small while others are nearly life-size. Made from terracotta, these simple yet expressive pieces often have large heads and stylized facial features. They are usually hollow and have open orifices, such as in the nose and mouth. Some figures are standing, kneeling, or seated. Their exact function is unknown, but it is thought that the artists may have been women.
What is watercolor?
While oil paints are made by mixing pigment with oil, watercolors are made by mixing pigment with water, usually for use on paper. Watercolors are applied in washes, which create a light, transparent area of color. Before the 19th century, watercolor was mostly used for quick sketches and was not considered to be as refined as other types of painting. However, perceptions of watercolor changed after John Ruskin, a famous 19th century art critic, promoted it, and the artist J.M.W. Turner, who also painted in oil, used watercolor for his dramatic and monumental paintings. Watercolor is still a popular medium used by artists around the world.